In this video, I'll go over how the master schedule functionality works in PCR and how students can automatically be loaded into the classes that they had selected during the course selection process. The first step before you build your master schedule is to create the blocks, the periods, and your classes. The master schedule builder, what that does is that it assigns periods and rooms to classes based on the fact that it'll assign them so that the schedule is optimized so that most people can get into the classes that they had selected. So under scheduling we have blocks, and you would set up the blocks in terms of the time periods for the day. So day 1 in my example means refers to Monday, day 2 refers to Tuesday, 3 Wednesday, then Thursday and Friday. And each day has a certain cell with a begin and an end time. So for example, if your period A begins from 8:50 and ends at 9:35, that would be your block. So you would first set up your blocks, and these can either be manually created or they could be imported through a spreadsheet. Once your blocks are built, the next step is to build your periods. So if I click on period codes, in my example I only have 10 periods. I have period A, advisory, assembly, B, C, D, and so forth. And period codes form a connection between a class and the blocks. So this period A will eventually be linked to many different classes, and if I go to details of this period, it's linked to these blocks here that we had previously created. So what the system looks at it, and it shows that period A on Monday, which is my day 1, will happen from 8:50 to 9:35. And then on Tuesday it'll happen from 8:35 to 9:50, Wednesday from 8 to 8:45, Thursday from 8:35 to 9:20, and Friday this period won't even meet. So once the periods are set up, you can create all the possible rooms, and these can also be imported through a spreadsheet. So whatever rooms the school has available, they can all be created. After that, you can create your courses, and courses can also be imported. So these are some of my courses: Algebra 2 Trig, Algebra 1, AP Art History, and so forth. Courses is a general term, so that courses you can specify some of the main things, such as how many credits the course has or how many semesters the course meets. But then within the course you have sections, and in the sections you can specify what teacher would be teaching a section, what room that the section would be taught in, what period the section would be taught in. So these would be your sections. So you may have certain numbers of courses, but within each course you could have either one section or you could have multiple sections. And the sections are usually created after the course selections come in from the students, because then you'll be able to run reports and determine how many sections to build for each class, and you'll be able to determine how many teachers to hire or how many different sections that you may want to build. Once your sections are built, and when you've built your sections, you would assign them to your teachers that will be teaching those sections. So at this time you're not gonna worry about the rooms or the periods that the class has to be taught in, but you'll create the classes and you'll just assign what teacher will teach each class. Once this part is done, then we would provide some parameters to the system so that it can assign these classes to a good room and a good period, so that most students can get into the classes that they selected. So for each course you can specify what we call period inclusions and room inclusions. What period inclusions tell the system is that these are all the possible periods that this course can be taught in. And what room inclusion says is that these are all the possible rooms that this class can be taught in. This is also done for the teacher side. So if you click on teachers details, they also have an option for period inclusions and room inclusions. So usually for courses, you may just add all the rooms and all the periods, but maybe for certain teachers, if teachers have their own particular room that they teach in, or if teachers are only available to teach in certain period codes, you would add those parameters so when the master schedule builds the classes, it'll only assign teachers to periods and to rooms that they can teach in, and so the periods and rooms that they can teach in. Once these parameters are done, then you could create something called a what if scenario. What if scenario is a backup, so it's a snapshot of your schedule at this time. So what happens is that if you create a what if scenario, and then later when you build a master schedule and you make any sort of mistake, you can come back to a backup and you can start fresh from that point on. So you can possibly create up to 99 different backups along the way. So you might have your first backup right before you build a master schedule. You might create another backup right after you build a master schedule, and then you might create another backup right before you finalize your entire schedule. So I'll go ahead and create a backup here by clicking create. And now at any time, if I make any changes and I want to come back to this point right here, I can come back here and I can use what if 101 and it'll restore me back to this point in time. Once you have a backup created, then you go to courses, and I'm just gonna pick courses that have at least greater than 0 sections, so that I can only build them if there are sections for my courses. So I select all my courses and I go to multi-action here and I click build master schedule. And here I can give different parameters, such as whether I want to build all my semesters for the year all at one time, or if I want to build one term at a time. I can also specify if I want to clear periods and rooms. What that means is that if I have manually assigned some classes already to periods and rooms, I may not want to clear them so that they don't get overridden. Otherwise, if I want, I could clear them out and just rebuild them. Maximum course request level. This means that it'll schedule those classes that that are ranked as #1 class for the students. So when students are picking classes, they can rank those classes, and if I select one, it'll only schedule those classes that are ranked at least #1 by at least one student. In this case, I'll just schedule all of them regardless. And then we have the sort courses by conflict count, number of sections, priority. You can sort in a way so that it schedules certain classes before others. So I usually do conflict count so that it schedules those classes that has the least number of conflicts, or that'll cause least number of conflicts first, so that students can more students can get into classes, and so that overall there will be less conflicts. Number of sections, if I were to use that as my priority, then the scheduler will schedule those classes that have the lowest number of sections first, and then it'll schedule classes that have more sections, because then they can possibly be assigned to more periods. Or you can do priority. So when you're creating a course, there's an option to mark priority, and if you do it by priority, it'll first schedule your highest priority classes first, and then all of your other classes. So you might use priority if you want to schedule all of your academic classes first. You might give them priority 1, and then your elective classes, you might give them priority 2. That way the system will schedule all of your academic classes first and then all of your elective classes. But in my case, I'll just do conflict count at the top, and then we hit build schedule. So when I build the schedule, it tells me total number of sections, how many were scheduled, how many were not scheduled. You might have some that were not scheduled, maybe because they didn't either have a period inclusion or a room inclusion, or it might be because the teachers that were assigned to the classes were already are already assigned to other classes, and they might already have a schedule for those classes, so these classes may not have been built. So you could click on the unscheduled classes and you could analyze why they may not have been built. In my example, the reason that the advisory class wasn't built was because I didn't have any selections for advisory class, meaning that no student had picked the advisory class, because I would manually add them to this class at the end. So that's why this class was not built with a period and a room, because once I'm done scheduling all my other classes, then I'll analyze whichever periods are left over for students and assign them to those advisory classes that are available. So but if I go to sections, I can see that all the other sections are built, meaning that they're assigned to a period and a room, all of these different sections. Once my sections are built, now I know what the schedule is like. So now I know that a cappella choir will be taught by lead, and it'll be taught in room 9 and in period A. So then I know when it'll be taught, because I know that period A is supposed to happen Monday 8:50 to 9:35 and so forth. So that's how I know what the schedule is for each class. So the next step is that we have to assign students to these classes that I built. So we go to students, and in this example I'll just do the students that are going into 12th grade next year. So I'll just search for 12th graders. I have 37, I select them, and I go to multi-action menu, load into courses. What this process does is it takes the selections that students had picked beforehand, and it loads those students into their classes that they had selected based on what their availability is like in terms of the periods and rooms. So percent capacity, that just means that how much of a class that you may want to fill. Usually we just leave it as 100%. Max paths, how many different iterations you want the system to go through to come up with the best schedule. Usually we leave it as default 100,000. If you're scheduling a lot more students, we would put in maybe like 1 million, or usually like 1 million or 2 million. And then schedule alternates. When students were picking classes, if you allow them to pick alternate classes for each of their primary class, you could check schedule alternates, and it'll put them in their alternative classes if they're not able to get in their primary class. Then you can do size balance, gender balance, and then min-max ranking. If you select 1, then it'll only load students into the classes that was their first choice class. Otherwise, you can do from 1 to 9, and it'll load them into as many classes as possible. Clear schedules means that if you've manually loaded some students into the classes, you don't want to check clear schedules, because then it'll clear those schedules out and re-add them to new classes. So this is usually kept unchecked. Then here you can sort students by grade level in random, by alphabetical, by name, or by ID. Grade level is usually useful if you're scheduling multiple grade levels and you might want to schedule seniors first. You could sort by grade level so that seniors are scheduled first. So once this is done, you click load students, and it just starts loading them here. So once you load the schedules, it tells you what the total number of selections were, meaning the total number of classes that were selected beforehand, how many students or how many of those selections were added, and then how many were bumped or incomplete. What bumped or incomplete means is that these students were not able to get into, or there were 3 classes that either one student or multiple students were not able to get into. So total number of classes that were selected were 253. Total number of classes that were added were 250, and there were only 3 classes out of the whole 253 that were not added to the schedule. So this is a pretty good turnout. So once you're done loading students into courses, the next step is to find these bump classes and see how you might be able to change the schedule for some students so that they're able to get into either these bump classes or some other classes. So the next step is that we go to our list of students, we go to multi-action PDF reports, and there's a report that I run is called students schedule student non-grid for the next year, because I'm scheduling for next year. And then it says show bumps. I do want to see the bump classes, and then I would request a report. The purpose of this report is to tell me the schedule of each student that I have selected, and it would also tell me the classes that a student was not able to get into. So I download this file, and now I can see each student and what classes they were able to get into for each semester. And then if I just search for the word bumped, it also tells me students that were not able to get into a certain class. So Laura was not able to get into a French culture class in semester 1 and semester 2, and this Charlotte was not able to get into French 4, and Sophia was not able to get into French 4. So these are the only bump classes I have. So there were a few students that were not able to get into one of the French classes. So the next step is for me to go through these students and identify if I can move them into some other class, or if I can add them to French but remove them from another class. Or what I could do is I could go back to my what if scenario that I had a backup of, make any other changes, like any sort of other parameters that I can add or remove, and then I can rebuild the schedule to see how the new schedule looks. So if I like this schedule what I have, I could save this schedule as a new what if scenario, and then change parameters, build another schedule. And if I like that one better, I could keep it, or if I like this one better, I can do a restore and come back to this schedule. But just as an example, let's look at Laura. She was not able to get into French culture, so what I would do is I would go to her schedule. So let me see, so her last name is Bonaun, so I would find her. Well, she's right here. And we go to her details and we go to conflicts list. And here I can see that she was not able to, so at the top it tells me what classes she was able to get into. Bottom tells me what class she had selected but was not able to get into. So it looks like this one has a period code of F, and she has AP Biology in F period. So then I can play with the schedule and move her into French class and maybe move around biology. So if I were to click the so the biology is only available for period F. So, and this class is also only available in period F. So if I wanted, I could move biology to another period, and then maybe have her be put into this to this French class. but I would have to analyze my biology class and see what other students, if I were to change this biology to a different period, would other students have problems getting in, or would they be able to get in? But the schedule tries to optimize it so that most students can get into the classes that they had selected. The other thing is that I could also talk to the student and put her in a different class that she may not have initially selected. So instead of French, if she wanted to take AP French Literature, this class is open because this is not it's not highlighted. If it's highlighted, it means that it'll cause a conflict with one of our current classes. But because this is not highlighted, I could talk to the student and maybe move the student to AP French class instead of the French culture class. So this is kind of at the end. Once you build your schedule, once you load students into the schedule, you kind of go through the bump classes and see if you can take students and move them into their alternate classes, or you can change a class to a different period so that you can move certain students into those classes, or you can pick some other class from the list that might be available for the student and add them to that class. And then the last thing, if you go to summary and master schedule, you can view the overall schedule for each teacher and what period the teacher is teaching in each class. And you can run different sorts of reports, such as the one that I had run here, to look at the overall schedule for whether it's for the student or for the teacher. And you can build certain reports and you can export them out to a spreadsheet.